Frustrated CEO podcast. In today's episode, we're going to explore to lead others, you need to lead yourself first. But this is a mindset, not a role. In this episode, we're going to look at the value and important work, some say counterintuitive work, of leading yourself first. Leading yourself first allows you to effectively and successfully lead others while leading your organization and maintaining a sense of personal well-being and clarity. This is Patsy Feeman, and I'm here with my colleagues, Leb Tannenbaum and Patrick Lyons. We are the Frustrated CEO podcasters. Today, we're going to take a look at what it costs you to be consistently on the go, what it gets you and your organization for you to lead yourself first. And we're going to propose a set of actions and practices for you to develop your own practice that either we ourselves have found effective or in many of the CEOs we work with have found effective. So, what's brought you to this place of frustration? Organizations are more complex than ever before. And complexities are rising at a rate exponential to anything actually any of us have ever seen before. You as a CEO, I imagine, often find yourself on a nonstop schedule with pressure from every direction to perform. Often caught in the 24/7 realm of social media and wondering how you're going to get it all done as you try to comprehend an ever-expanding world of information. We've heard from many of you that you want to focus on achieving your organization's strategy, creating an intentional culture, shifting the mindset of others, and getting everyone to perform. And yet, in actuality, to accomplish these efforts, it has to start with you and your ability to lead yourself first. Many studies on culture, including data provided through the Denison Culture Model, show that leaders have the greatest impact on culture. And Leb, I know you've done decades worth of work on culture and culture development. So I'm wondering what you have to say on this around leaders and their impact on culture.
Well, thanks, Patsy. There's a lot to say. I think the first thing is that because Denison Consulting in Ann Arbor, Michigan, has a research and development team, they actually analyzed hundreds of thousands of responses from employees in certain categories within their culture survey model and verified what I think we all recognized. But it's still kind of cool that it got verified, right? Is that leaders have a tremendous impact on an organization's culture. And, when I try to tie that to first leading yourself, it's like, if I'm not intentional about leading myself, how can I be asking or designing or delivering an intentional culture? Right? Cultures, in the early days of organizational culture research and study, it was pretty obvious that cultures were formed primarily by the CEO, right? And some of them probably turned out as an almost direct reflection of that CEO's habits, personality, maybe their style, their ability to motivate. All of that seeps into the culture and becomes the culture. But as we know today, people move around. CEOs change and come and go. And so in general, I'd say leaders do influence an organization's culture. It's been verified. I think we knew that from the beginning. And leaders who haven't taken the steps, maybe some of it is mindfulness, to recognize that how they lead themselves models for others what leadership even looks like. Really important and a good reason to examine this topic.
Great. Yes, we acknowledge that as CEO, both focus external conditions and the internal operations leadership of the organization. So I appreciate many of the points that you just brought up, Leb. uh, really about focusing on the why of the organization's purpose and your impact as a leader. So, audience, as you're listening to this, what are some of the frustrations that you often face as a leader, especially around culture development? Even as Leb's pointing out that leaders have the biggest impact on culture. It's, for recently, we were looking recently at a Harvard Business Review called the nonstop treadmill that CEOs live on as their hurry illness.
Mm.
So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about what does it really cost you to be on this 24/7 nonstop treadmill. It can cost you a shorter attention span, in the very least, a shorter attention span. There's been a lot talked about lately about multitasking and what it costs you. It can cost you poor communication skills. It can cost you personally growing levels of anxiety and stress, and can cost those around you and even in your organization as an aspect of your culture, growing levels of anxiety and stress. And it can cost you breakdowns in relationships. And if leaders have the biggest impact, or their goal is to make an impact, then how we establish our relationships is vitally important. So all of these factors decrease your effectiveness as the CEO, your thoughtfulness as a leader. So Patrick or Leb, I know, I'd be curious to see what you've seen it's costing many of the CEOs that you're working with by being on this hurry treadmill.
Yeah, thank you. Um, several examples come to mind. I've got there's a partner at an accounting firm here in downtown Portland that I've worked with and talked to frequently, and it's fascinating. Sometimes we lose focus, we lose the ability to see that we're so down in it that it just helps to have that trusted partner you can talk to say, here's what I'm struggling with, and it almost always comes up in our conversations that when he's really feeling when he's frustrated with what's going on in the organization, or he's having exactly what you said, Patsy, challenges communicating with his team, or working through conflict with his partner. So often it comes back to, well, how much time are you spending focusing on yourself, making sure that the best version of you can show up each day? Are what's important to him is exercise. That's his that's his happy place. So when he's not getting his daily exercise, when he feels like he's not taking care of himself physically, it very quickly bleeds into every other part. And not only does it bleed into his work, but it also bleeds into how he feels at home. So the frustrated CEO then comes home and becomes the frustrated husband and father. And he has shared those stories, and usually it'll come out in the form of, he'll share in the story, oh, this happened and I didn't handle it right. Either this happened at work or this happened at home, and I know I didn't handle it right. I just lost my cool, and I said something I shouldn't have, or I reacted out of anger. And it almost always comes back to, well, what are you doing to keep yourself in that good place? How are you leading yourself first, so that the best version of you can handle the conflict at home or handle the
Great,
conflict at work?
great, great
Mhm.
example.
Yeah. I mean, I could think of a time when I was actually not consulting. I was inside a large organization, and it was probably after somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 12 canceled one-on-ones. I decided I needed to have a conversation with my leader. And he literally, I kind of followed him into his office, and he sat in his chair, and I just kind of innocently maybe asked, do we need to change the date for our one-on-ones, because the last 9 or so one-on-ones have been canceled? And he screamed. And what he screamed was, I don't even have enough time to go to the bathroom. And I didn't, it was a little awkward, but it led to the kind of this breakthrough conversation we had, because I was like, wait a minute, you're the leader. Why not? And that really caught him off guard. And in terms of cost, I mean, it was obvious it cost him his relationship with the people that were reporting to him. And it cost him any sense of their sense of self-worth or being a meaningful part of something that he was leading, because he just wasn't available. When we started talking about it further, basically pointed to that he was overly focused on the CEO. He was on the executive team in a very high role, and the executive team, but that's not where his work got delivered. That's not where strategy got executed. That's not where the culture of this entire division of people that he ran lived. And so it cost him meaningful relationships. It cost him a sense of loyalty with the people around him. And it also cost in motivation. I think he admitted it cost in clear decision making. He was just under pressure. Under pressure all the time. The last thing I'd say is, it was pretty obvious over a period of time that it was costing him his health. And some of that was in weight gain. Some of that was in just even the appearance of his skin. And when you're up in front of people as a leader and you're not leading yourself first, you may be saying the right things, but if your physical presence is saying something else, it's really hard for others to really grab hold of it, or say aspire to it, or say I want to follow that leader, because I don't want to get unhealthy. I don't want to lose my relationships at home or at work. I don't want to lose the intimacy that makes work fun. I don't want to lose all of these things. So I think the cost is high, and it's a great topic to bring up, Patsy.
Well, and just listening to the examples each of you have presented, I can already start to feel myself kind of like tightening up, my breath shortening, and I'm like, so imagine just if the readers took a brief moment to see how they're reacting to just what it's costing you to not lead yourself first. Perhaps you're having some of the same reactions I'm having. So what are some of the advantages of switching this around? What does leading yourself first get you? It gets you more energy, clarity, and vitality. It gets you more time and space to actually see the bigger picture, to focus on that strategy, to kind of balance that realm between the external focus and the internal leadership. It also gives you space to observe your effectiveness and reflect on the performance of teams and others in the organization. I mean, you've got as a CEO, you have a very unique perspective on your whole company. So it gives you the opportunity to observe.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you a moment to see, are you really enjoying your life? I mean, Patrick, your example of that kind of whole life balance is really a good one, because it does give you the opportunity for a holistic approach to family, self, and leading your organization. You can't lead yourself if you're not well at home.
That's right.
So anything you'd either want to add to some of the other things you're seeing as advantages of leading yourself first? Leb, you mentioned a few of those, but maybe you have some more.
Well, they kind of show up in different places. I know that some of the CEOs we work with use physical exercise as a way to kind of slow down, or in the exercise moment reflect. And there are a lot of benefits in doing that. Obviously there's a physical benefit in that for that person. And that's important. But it's also modeling something. So if your entire workforce is watching you, and they see that you take the time, maybe it's at noon or something, and you take the time to do something physical because you think it's important. It speaks without you saying a word. And I think, there's a benefit there. I know a CEO who actually had about 220 executives in this particular organization who mandated, meaning blessed to a certain degree, that each executive take 15-minute reflection walks twice a day. And people grumbled and said, well, why and how can I do that? And it was block yourself some white space. And the benefits that were talked about a few months later were obvious, and people loved it. And I'm not a brain specialist, but I know something special happens when you give yourself a little space, and maybe you get outside and take a walk as short as a 10-minute walk, and you come back in and you process something that you weren't going to process when you're on that treadmill. So I don't know if that gets to all of it, but I think a lot of people have different methods for slowing things down enough to gain the benefit of leading yourself. I use journaling, and I use walking personally. The last thing I'd say is there's nothing like a good story. And I know some leaders who are good storytellers. And a story can kind of offer and slow things down for everybody. And that may be another benefit in what we're talking about.
Right. Well, it's a perfect segue into really looking at what happens when we give ourselves those moments to reflect, whether it's walking or meditation, because it does start to build self-awareness on many levels, and it allows you to develop self-leadership by engaging with a different part of your brain. I mean, neuroscience is proving that over and over again, that we need access to that part of our brain to really be aligned. It also helps us to align our interests and our values. If we're trying to lead an organization in a direction that's not part of our own values, then how can the rest of the organization be aligned if we're not aligned?
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you direction and focus to lead others. Sometimes we do. I mentioned earlier about observation. We do need a space to be able to step back and see the bigger picture, see what obstacles are in the way. And as we often work with our clients, to acknowledge things that are going right. It's not always about things that are going wrong. It's like storytelling and acknowledging others is really key and part of building your impact as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And it allows us to build our emotional intelligence. You see over and over again reports from CEOs that often in the top 5 things they're wanting to see more in their organization is that their teams, their individuals in their organizations have emotional intelligence. Well, if we don't have the capacity to be aware of and control and express your emotions and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically, how can we expect others to do that? So as you were telling that example earlier, Leb, it reminded me that leaders lead by example.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody in the organization looks to the leader.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You triggered another thought for me too, Patsy, which is, everyone talks about communication, and a lot of times, I've found that CEOs focus their communication lens on speaking. Well, the CEOs that I see that are really effective and balanced are good listeners. And if your head is so full all the time, it's kind of like, you got a full glass of water and you just keep holding the pitcher over the water, and it just keeps spilling over and over and over, and there's no room for anything to get in there. People know when they've been listened to, and they deeply appreciate it. So I think there's something there as well. and setting the tone for the importance of listening as well as speaking, and clearing your mind enough that you can really hear what your people are saying.
Yep.
Mm.
Yep.
You know what I think you also gain by leading yourself first is credibility. It's kind of like what Leb, you were saying earlier. People watch what you do. When I've talked to employees in organizations where the CEO is just what you described, just so full, and you can't get an audience with the Pope because the Pope is always so busy, and it's the Wizard of Oz. It sits in the back room, and nobody can get there because there's just never time. And what I've found is those employees have a sense of they feel bad for the leader. They make excuses for. They understand it. Oh yeah, she's so busy, and or he's got a lot on his plate, and they do. But at the same time, there is a desire for an accessible leader. There's a desire for someone who can actually help them remove the obstacles that are in their way, that are keeping them from doing what they know they need to do, and maybe what's being asked of them from that C-suite. So leaders who don't make time for themselves, and therefore can't clear some of that water from the cup, or can't clear time in their own schedule to, if they can't get themselves in a good place, over time you begin to lose credibility. Your employees will feel bad for you, but they won't necessarily like working for you. And then I think that just becomes part of the story that you hear in the organization. That's one thing that I think if you spend a day walking the halls of an organization, even without meeting the leader, you'll have a good sense of what's the, how does this leadership team lead? It goes back to what we started with, which is, right, leaders have the greatest impact on organization culture. So if there's chaos and franticness, I don't know if that's a word, but there's franticness in the organization, in the halls of the organization, in all likelihood that's coming down from the C-suite. And so if you want to change that, you got to stop and take that time, go for that walk. I have a client who does that 10-minute walk every day, and he challenges his leadership team. Take that walk just to clear your head. Leave your phone at your desk. Think about it. If you want to think about the issue of the day, that's fine, but go clear your space, clear your head, and you'd be amazed at what happens. And he swears by it. That's his chance to lead himself before he can lead anybody else.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. So audience, I'm curious, what are you seeing for yourself when you take a moment to be intentional about your leadership, to give yourself that time to be reflective? And do you want more of that? So all this presents a strong case for slowing down and perhaps debunking many of the common beliefs that if I only go faster, work long enough hours, talk louder, talk even louder, I'll finally get it all done. And then you get to do it all again and then again. Reminds me of the old adage that to go faster, you have to start slower. It's, again, very, very counterintuitive. So how do you do this? The real work of leading yourself first. You might be asking yourself, or you might have a practice that you want to make better or add things to. I'll interject here that many of the successful CEOs, such as Warren Beatty and Bill Gates, report that their practice of slowing down to reflect on a regular and consistent basis is critical to their success and well-being. You hear that from many of from startup CEOs to people that are at the top of their game. We had a client who had a mantra. If you want to build a 3-story house, you have to build a 3-story foundation. So if you want to have the greatest impact in your leadership, you have to lead yourself first. It's your foundation for how you're going to lead your organization. So we're going to introduce some practices that other leaders have found useful and can support you in learning to lead yourself first. we emphasize the idea of developing new practices because it does boil down to putting yourself into new actions that support you and your commitments to lead your organization. This is going to require both practicing the new as well as letting go or shifting some of your current behaviors. So what are some suggestions? One is self-awareness. We talked about that a little earlier. Develop clarity and a deep knowledge of who you are, your values, your beliefs, what you want, your goals and objectives. Live them as if they're your life's compass. Without direction and purpose, you'll easily be led astray from where you want to take your organization. Another practice is to know yourself first. Know your personality, your natural tendencies. There are a variety of tools and practices that help get clarity on that. And ask yourself, why might this be important? I know I can tend to be overly collaborative, and there are times that I just have to make a decision. So knowing about that by myself, I have to be very focused on, am I letting something run over and over? Is it time to make a decision? Another is to take control of your thoughts. Be aware of shortcomings. Know your biases, preferences, and deficiencies. Courage. We often see courage as a prerequisite of integrity. It's a willingness to sacrifice your own well-being in order to act in a way that is true to your beliefs and values. By embracing your authentic self. Brené Brown's research in her book, Dare to Lead, shows courage as a critical component of leadership, actually foundational component of leadership. And as a counterintuitive move for many people. Another idea is to take initiative in every situation, which we call integrity. Take action, not just think about it, in a manner that is consistent with your beliefs and values. We're talking earlier about acknowledging others. That's an action, not just a thought, thinking that builds your organization. Prioritize what matters, working on what matters most. There are a lot of shiny objects out there, especially if you don't have a clear and focused direction for your company and for your leadership. Let it be about the team that matters for your success, not about you needing to get the credit. I've talked earlier about the impact that leaders have on culture. This is a key piece of that. Be a learner. This is one of my favorites. Be a learner. Be willing to see your blind spots, acknowledge and let go of old patterns, and choose a new and more powerful frame that shifts your awareness, attention, action, and impact. In this ever-expanding, exponentially growing, complex world we're living in, being a learner is another part of that key foundation. And as we've been talking about already today, take time to pause, reflect, pivot, and acknowledge. Acknowledge you and yourself as a leader, and acknowledge those around you. Anything, Patrick Olab, you'd like to add to that list?
Yeah, I'll add one thing. It's a great list. I'll add one thing to it. I think that's give yourself permission. There is something inherently selfish about boundaries, right? There's something inherently selfish about saying, I have to take care of myself physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever it might be, in order for me to be able to show up my best. So it feels selfish to put me above all these burning issues, the one-on-ones with my employees, or the teams that need my help or my input. And I guess by definition, boundaries are selfish because they're yours. They are about you, but they are necessary for all the reasons that we've talked about. So I would just encourage you, the frustrated CEO, give yourself permission to stop the treadmill. Give yourself permission to go for that walk. Give yourself permission to take a breath. Whatever stopping the chaos looks like for you, it's actually a really good thing, right? What's on the other side of that selfishness is a better version of you in a better place that will show up better for your employees and better for your customers and better in all those ways that we've talked about. So that's my ad. Gleb, how about
Great.
you?
Thanks, Patrick.
Well, again, it is a great list. One thing that comes to mind is to remain coachable. You know, you may be the CEO or you may be in a key executive role, but to remain coachable is important. And that's a good way to keep sharpening your saw, demonstrate to others that you're coachable as well. It's not like I got a title, so I've arrived and I'm now a finished product. So I see great value on that. And the last thing, and it's especially, I think we're actually going to do a podcast on this, is in the near future is, and I really struggle with this one, which is how do I allow for or even promote that some of the work we do can be fun? I've never been one to remember jokes, but whatever you can find that offers some lightness and some laughter and some joy in the workplace, I think is something also that can't be overlooked.
Great additions. Thank you both. We trust you've taken a few moments to reflect on the hurriedness of leading your organization and perhaps what is costing you to be so busy. And perhaps you want more, and perhaps what you want more of for yourself and for the impact you're having on others. We invite you, as a result of what you've reflected on today, to identify one new action, one next step you can take to leading yourself first, so that you can radiate your leadership out to others. We do make our list of suggestions available on our website as a Let's Get Practical guide. You can find that at thefrustratedceo.com. We'd welcome any reflections you've had from today, and we'd welcome you to download that guide. We thank you greatly for joining us and for learning today. And hope that you've created more practices that will allow you to lead yourself first. Till next time, see you then.
Thank you.
Thank you.